So you're in your early 50s and you want to get retired before you hit the age 60. Well, how much should you be saving each month? We're going to break it down for you and lay out the plan so that you can retire early if that's your choice. Coming up. John, got a good question today. I know more and more people are looking to retire early, maybe by the age of 60. I know typically retirement age falls a little bit later, but we got a quick question today that I want to kind of run through you and break this down to try to help this person out that has this goal. So here's the question. I'm 50 and would like to retire before I'm 60. I'm willing to save aggressively to make that happen, but how do I determine how much I need to save each month?
Yeah, so when we're talking about retiring, quote unquote, early, that can mean different things to different people, right? So if you're a teacher, well, you could be retiring at 55, and that wouldn't necessarily be quote unquote early because you worked for 30 years, you've got your full state pension. That's not early for a teacher. For some people, retiring before 60, anytime before 60, if you're retiring in your 50s at all, that's retiring early. For some people, retiring before 65, because that was the age that made sense for past generations. It was kind of the conventional retirement age. For some people, before 70 is retiring early. So, that's one thing we have to not get too caught up in the terminology there because it means different things to different people. But we do need to be aware of some specific milestone ages that really do matter when we're talking about retirement. Because if you're retiring before any of these milestone ages, there are different things that we need to talk about. So like in this case, talking about retiring before 60, well, that's kind of before pretty much all the ages that we're going to go over here.
Okay. Well, let's break it down by ages then and just kind of give people a little heads up on what to expect for each of these milestone ages. Again, if you have questions, go to meetwithjohn.com to schedule a time to talk with John. All right. 65, the big number. I think this is kind of the target that most people think of in terms of retirement age. So what's important with 65?
So age 65 used to be full retirement age for Social Security as well as Medicare age. Now full retirement age for Social Security is a little bit older, which is going to be 66 and some number of months, or 67, depending on your birth year. But 65 is still Medicare age. So if we're retiring before 65, that means that we have to have a plan for what your health insurance coverage is going to be if you retire, quote unquote, early before 65. Now, some people absolutely will not retire before Medicare age. Their employer has covered their health insurance for 40 years, and they can't fathom the idea of having their own health insurance coverage, even if it's for a year or two. So they're just going to work till 65, even if they could retire earlier. But if you want to retire before that, we have to think about what your coverage is going to be because you don't have that automatic built-in Medicare coverage. So let's suppose you're retiring at 64. Well, you could just take COBRA, assuming you have a health insurance coverage plan at work. You can do COBRA for up to 18 months. So you could say, all right, well, I'm just going to pay for COBRA. That'll get me to Medicare age, and then I'll go on Medicare. Certainly a possibility. Now, COBRA might be more expensive than what you want to pay. You might be better off to find a different plan that will cost you less, but we know you can at least have coverage one way or another. If you're worried about qualifying or whatever, you can have, at the very least, that guaranteed coverage through COBRA. If you're retiring more than 18 months before 65, let's say you're retiring at 61, all right, well, we're just going to have a plan. Are we going through the marketplace to make sure that you have coverage that way? Do you have a spouse who's still working, whose plan you could get on? There's not a particular solution necessarily. It's just something we have to think through. If we're retiring before Medicare age, what's your coverage situation going to be? So that's a big one.
Yeah, it seems like that's got to be one of the bigger ones. If you're going to retire early, that's something you have to address because, again, it can be really expensive. And especially if you've never paid for COBRA or handled your own healthcare costs, it can be pretty eye-opening how much that is. All right, so 65, a big age for healthcare. So let's go to age 62 then. This is another big age in terms of retiring early, some things you need to be thinking through. I know Social Security starts at 62. Is that the big number here?
That is the big one. So if you're retiring, let's say at 60, we know we have at least 2 years where you don't have any baseline income, unless you have a pension. So like if you're a state employee or you just happen to work for a company that has a pension plan, which is becoming increasingly rare, then you might have some income coming in. But if you're more of an average person who just has retirement savings and you're eventually going to get Social Security, taking that Social Security at age 60 is not an option. 62 is the youngest you can start that. So the income planning becomes easier, obviously, once we have that Social Security in place, because let's say you need $8,000 a month to live your life. Well, if we have $2,000 a month of that coming in from Social Security, you can see how it becomes easier to generate the $6,000 a month from your investments. But if you're retiring before Social Security age, we're starting at ground zero, and we have to create all of that $8,000 a month, or whatever the number is that you need. We have to create all of it from just your investments. So that can be a big paycheck gap to fill for a lot of people when we don't have the head start of Social Security. Now, just because you can start Social Security at 62 doesn't mean that's going to be the best thing for you, but we at least know that we have that in our back pocket if you're retiring at 62 or later. So like as an example, let's say you retired at 63 and we don't start your Social Security yet, and we have income coming in from investments that covers you for now. But then we have like a catastrophic market crash to the point that we don't want to be pulling that much money off of your portfolio. Well, now we have Social Security in our back pocket, and we could go ahead and start that benefit then. Let's say you're 64 at that point. We go ahead and start that check. Now we don't have to pull as much money off of your portfolio. But if you retire at 61 and the market crashes almost immediately, and now we don't have the option of starting Social Security, you can see how this creates a problem if we're completely dependent on your investments for income. So again, that's another age to be aware of.
Yeah, so obviously healthcare, you have to have the income plan worked out. Again, two things that will obviously be relevant to someone trying to retire by 60. So let's back up kind of into that zone, John. 59 and a half is the next key age. What happens there?
Yep. So that's when you can withdraw from your retirement accounts without penalty. So you're always going to be taxed on money that you take out of a traditional IRA or a 401k. Anything that you have not paid taxes on yet, it's going to count as taxable income when you pull it out. Obviously, a Roth IRA, you can take out tax-free, but 59 and a half still applies to all of those accounts from the penalty standpoint. If you withdraw from any of them before 59 and a half, you're going to pay an extra 10% penalty in addition to your ordinary income tax. And so that's a pretty steep hit for people who are pulling money out early. So if you're going to retire before 59 and a half, we still have all these other things to think about that we just talked about. What's your health insurance coverage going to be? Because you're well away from Medicare age at that point. We're still a few years away from Social Security. So do we have enough money to generate your income until we get to Social Security age? And now if we're younger than 59 and a half, we also don't have the luxury of using your retirement accounts. You need to have enough money saved in non-retirement. So like just either cash in the bank or a brokerage account, some kind of after-tax investment that's not in a sheltered retirement account. So if we're retiring at, say, 57, that's a lot of things to think about. Health insurance coverage with no Social Security yet, and we can't touch your retirement accounts without penalty. So only people who have been really aggressive about saving money outside of retirement accounts are going to be in a position to retire that early. And we certainly have clients that are in that boat, but 90% of America, most of their retirement savings, I don't know if that's a real statistic, but I would say that's about right. Most people, most of their retirement savings is in these retirement accounts. And so retiring before 59 and a half for them is not very realistic. So there's nothing to say that you can't retire before you get to that Medicare age at 65 or Social Security age at 62 or retirement account age at 59 and a half. You certainly can. Like all these problems are solved by just having enough money. You can buy your own health insurance. It just takes money. And you can make up for the fact that you don't have a Social Security check. It just takes money. So it's a matter of how aggressive you've been with your savings up to this point. So if you're 50, back to our original question today, if you're 50 and you're trying to retire by 60, well, we need to take a good hard look at how much money you need to generate the lifestyle that you want. And then we need to make sure that we have enough money in non-retirement accounts, because you're retiring before you can touch that. We need to have enough money in those accounts to at least get us to the age where you can then pull from your retirement accounts. So let's say, again, you're retiring at 58. All right, well, we only need 18 months of income in a non-retirement account to get us to the point that we can then pull from retirement accounts. So in that case, maybe it's not that much that you have to have saved in those other accounts, but then at 59 and a half, we have to have enough in there to get you through the end of your life. Understanding that Social Security is going to come in at some point, but we just have to make sure that there's enough money in these different pots to do what you need to do.
So you can't really answer that question on the surface without knowing more about the situation, what the person's going to need, that sort of thing. But obviously, the more you can save, the better. And the earlier you want to retire, the more planning that goes into it. So if you want to sit down and have this conversation with John and start looking at your picture and kind of what you need to do to get there and reach that goal, meetwithjohn.com. That's the best place to get on John's calendar. And again, asking 10 years out, John's probably a good thing, right? Getting it this far ahead of it probably gives that person a pretty good chance of being where they want to be by age 60.
Yeah, because that question said, I'm willing to save aggressively to make this goal happen. Well, if we've got 10 years of saving aggressively and we have a plan and we know exactly where and how that money needs to be saved, yeah, that's probably an achievable goal. But if you're saying, I want to retire in a year or 18 months, and what do I need to do to get there? And you don't have nearly enough in these accounts that we're talking about. Well, okay, that's going to be a problem.
All right. Well, no matter what your goal is, Rosewood Wealth Management can help with that. And again, if you have questions for us, reach out, drop a line to John, or leave a comment down below. We'll try to answer those questions there as well. Bring one for a future video possibly. So, John, thanks again.
Always a pleasure.
Carolina Wealth Stewards doing business as Rosewood Wealth Management is a registered investment advisor in the state of North Carolina. The material presented is intended to be general information and should not be construed by any consumer as the rendering of personalized investment advice.